seekers, please visit our website, christgnostic.com. We are here for you and love bringing you educational content. Please consider making a donation at our website. Much love and respect to all.
Well, I guess it's time for the good old Gospel of Matthew. And we had finished the Sermon on the Mount, and that leaves us at the threshold of chapter 8. And I ready to go with it. You're going to notice a lot of this stuff has a sense of deja vu because it wasn't too long ago when we discussed this in Mark. But you know why that is, right? Because Matthew uses over 90% of Mark's text with certain interesting and significant editorial alterations. And we're going to see one pretty quick. So let's launch in, shall we? Okay, when he came down from the mountain, great crowds followed him, and behold, a leper came to him and knelt before him, saying, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. And he stretched out his hand and touched Jesus, stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I will, be clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And now what was this, right? I think I've mentioned this before. Guess we could use a reminder. This wasn't what we, this was probably referring to skin eruptions like psoriasis and eczema, which can have a psychosomatic origin and cure. It's not what we usually think of as leprosy now, which is, you might as well stop using that word because, not that it's offensive or anything, right? It's just that technically, to distinguish it from psoriasis and eczema, it's what we call Hansen's disease, where, you're losing fingers and stuff like that. And so this guy apparently, if there's any basis to this, had eczema or some such thing. Okay, so verse 4, Jesus said to him, see that you say nothing to anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a proof to the people. Now, you could read that superficially and say, what a contradiction. He says, don't tell anybody. And in the next breath, go tell the priest and let him inspect you and, give you the all clear. And let's see, offer the sacrificial thank offering. So as a proof for the people, well, I thought he wasn't supposed to say anything. Well, of course, what he means is don't tell anybody that Jesus is the one responsible for his cure. Right? It's not that explicit, but I think in line with all the other places where Jesus forbids those he's healed to blab about it, though they do anyway, and tells the demons to shut up. It's pretty obvious that's what he has to mean. Now, why did he have to go and be inspected? Well, because people were afraid either that they would contract ritual uncleanness from any contact with him, or maybe they thought it was actually contagious. I don't know. But either way, you would become a pariah. In fact, don't we use the word leper for that sometimes? I'm getting rid of another one of those demons. I think that was the demon of Bultmann, maybe. Anyway, so if you wanted to circulate in society and people saw you coming and said, no, it's okay. See, I got my papers right here. Oh, whew, what a relief. So that's what they're talking about there, right? Okay, verse 5, as he entered Capernaum, a centurion, Roman, right, came forward to him, beseeching him and saying, Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home in terrible distress. And he said to him, I will come and heal him. But the centurion answered him, Lord, I'm not worthy to have you come under my roof. Only say the word, and my servant will be healed, for I know how it works. He says, I am a man under authority with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my slave, do this, and he does it. So I know that you have this authority. So if you tell the paralysis, etc., to depart, it will. Whoa! So when Jesus heard him, he marveled and said to those who followed him, "Truly, I say to you, not even in Israel have I found such faith." I tell you, many will come from east and west and sit at table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom, like the natural heirs, who you would think would certainly be there as a matter of course, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness, there men will weep and gnash their teeth. And to the centurion, Jesus says, go, be it done for you as you have believed. And the servant was healed at that very moment. Now, this is not exactly what we call faith healing, because at least we tend to mean by that, well, like Jesus says to people he heals, your faith has saved you. And so we start theorizing maybe it's like Jesus is a focus for their faith, and it's their faith that makes the leap and heals the body. That's not what's going on in some of the cases, like this one, where nothing is said about the servant. No, it's the faith of the Roman centurion that Jesus is taken aback by, so it's like vicarious faith, just like when the paralytic is lowered through the roof, and Jesus says, because of his friend's faith, he's healing the guy. Interesting. Let's see. This is one of the passages on which Joachim Jeremias based his theory, which I think is very reasonable, really a clincher, that when Jesus and other Jewish Christians thought it unnecessary to go to preach their gospel to Gentiles, that because eventually, soon, they all thought, the world as we know it would come to an end. And as Micah and Isaiah prophesied, all the nations would realize that Jews had been right all along as to who's the real God and all of that. What's the right way to behave? Well, they say, okay, let's go to Jerusalem. Let's go to the temple and ask them to catechize us, to teach us more about the Torah, because now we know it is the word of God and we want to live that way. And so you won't have to send out missionaries, because they'll come, the unevangelized will come to you. And so that's what's going on here, right? He says that you're going to have people from east and west, from all nations, coming here to learn the truth. But what about the sons, the heirs of the kingdom, fellow Jews? What are they going to see? How are they going to react to what they see on that day? Well, if they are excluded, because after all, he's just said, I haven't found this quality of faith among my fellow Israelites here. And those who don't have that faith, but just take their status with God for granted, they're not going to be invited to this feast. And when they see the patriarchs there and welcoming all of these Hicks and pagans and so forth from everywhere coming in, taking their places, well, in Luke, who seems to be closer to the Q original usually, where he and Matthew were sharing it. In Luke, it just says, when they see it in anguish, they will weep and gnash their teeth in anguish. Well, Matthew is a big fan of the idea of people going to hell more than anybody else. And so he has added that they will be tossed into the outer darkness. Okay, different metaphor, but damnation. And there men will weep and gnash their teeth. Aha! At the final judgment, they're going to be ejected into some kind of a twilight zone of torment, and they will weep and gnash their teeth in pain. That's a somewhat different thing. And he liked that so much that he added, as we'll see in several other places, statements where Jesus says, the angels will throw him into the furnace and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. There's at least 3 more of those that he has added, and he's the only gospel writer to say it. So now that's not what Luke's or Q, either one, said by using these words. No, Q just said, boy, you're going to rue the day. It doesn't say you're going to be tortured with little imps with their horns and with their pitchforks sticking in you, and so that you're being fried like a side of beef. I'm getting ready for that day. Matthew is the one that really is the hellfire preacher. Okay, so on quickly to the next one. This one from Mark. And when Jesus entered Peter's house, he saw his mother, Peter's mother-in-law, lying sick with a fever, and he touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she rose and served him. That seems, as Thomas L. Brody has argued, that seems to be yet another slightly reshuffled version of Elijah and the widow of in Sidon, I think, where you've got the woman, no mention of a husband, must be a widow, her son, and the healing prophet. Well, the gospel tradition rewrote that one a few times, and so here's apparently the widow and her son Peter and the miracle working prophet Jesus, and it has to do with eating again in 1 Kings with Elijah. The famine has struck the land, and the woman, the widow, is looking for kindling to make the last pancake they can, because she has so little meal, a terrible famine. And the prophet says, no, why don't you make me the pancake? Boy, that seems pretty selfish and presumptuous, but it isn't. It's, again, a kind of Socratic feigning. It's exactly analogous to Jesus and the Syrophoenician woman who has a demon-possessed daughter, right? He's testing her determination, which is another way of saying her faith, by posing this nasty sounding question. I'm sorry, I can't take the food that belongs to the children, my fellow children of Israel, and give it to the dogs. And she says, well, I see that, but don't you see the kids giving crumbs and stuff and scraps to the dogs under the table? Bingo. And he says, yeah, just for that answer, you can go home and find her okay. And she is delivered from the demon. Same thing here in the Elijah story. It seems arrogant. And no, skip your meal, bring me the pancake. But no, will she do it? Even though it sounds unreasonable, well, she does. She's willing to give the itinerant prophet the meal she and her son were going to eat as their last meal. That shows she's really devout. Better that the man of God get it than me. But they do get it because he miraculously multiplies the stuff and rewards their faith. And very similar. And it's no surprise since the one seems to be a rewrite of the other. Okay. So he cures her of this fever. At verse 16, that evening they brought to him many who were possessed with demons, and he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. He took our infirmities and bore our diseases. Of course, that's the famous Isaiah 53. But there, it seems the point is that whoever they're talking about, and it might be the king of Judah, don't want to get into that whole shebang at the moment, but he suffered for our sins that were laid upon him. So it was vicarious atonement that whoever this was made. I mean, he couldn't have assumed that his readers, his contemporaries, would know that this applied to Jesus, who's like 700 years in the future. Though some Jews post-Jesus did think it applied to the coming Messiah. But nonetheless, here, it doesn't even make that kind of appeal to it. It just says, well, they were sick and he got rid of what was ailing them. That's really a whole different idea. Jesus the healer, not so much Jesus the Savior. Okay. He healed every one of the people in the crowds. I noticed the last time I went over this that Mark is a little more reticent. He still has extravagant stories and really usually summaries, not part of an individual healing story, but where he sums up and says, and he healed a lot of people there. He doesn't go quite as far as Matthew does, who absolutizes it and says, everybody and his brother brought the sick to Jesus, and he healed every stinking one of them. There, we're really reading a Superman comic. Does this have plausibility when you find that hundreds or thousands of people were brought to Jesus with madness and possession and a whole range of diseases, and he healed every one of them? It's just impossible to imagine that happening. It's fantasy land. If you say, oh yes, but with God all things are possible, well, you're just making the story a function of a prior absolutist belief, right? You're not really looking at it as, is this analogous to anything we know? Do any faith healers today, if perhaps they heal some, do they heal everybody that comes to them? Well, they make it look that way through tricks, but they don't. And why would it not be the same? Oral Roberts used to torment himself with that. Why, I have the spirit of Jesus like any real Christian does. Why can I not heal the sick like Jesus did? And so he kind of issued an ultimatum to God and said, I want that healing power. And he never claimed to heal everybody. And who knows, he was sort of a con artist in his own way. Probably not as odiously as his son, Richard Roberts, who I always thought just might as well have been wearing a T-shirt saying, I'm a crook. I mean, he wasn't even a good fake actor. So Matthew hypes it up. It's just what you'd expect. The later gospel makes it more spectacular than the earlier one. 18, when Jesus saw the great crowds around him, he gave orders to the disciples to go over to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, or the Lake of Galilee, really. That reminds me of once a friend of mine who was sort of highfalutin despite her more modest origins. She really pictured herself as a princess, and somehow, I don't know what the situation was, but the friend was out on the porch trying to repair a bulb in a rusty old socket, and she said, "Don't hit the chandelier." I thought, lady, come on, you're delusional. Yeah, that could be. Let's see here. Matthew is hyping things up. Okay, let's go to and the Lake of Galilee. You should have called it a lake, but no, it's ours. We're going to call it the Sea of Galilee. Okay, highfalutin. 18 go to the other side, right? And a scribe came up and said to him, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. You think again, the human beings really have no one environment, and look at the Bedouins and so forth. They're always moving around, and so am I. This is one of those places where Son of Man denotes the condition of humans in general, and then by implication, the conditions of the person speaking. But instead of saying I, he says the Son of Man. Okay. Joe Human, right? The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. And you're saying you want to join the ranks of my wandering sages and all that? You sure? No home, right? And another of the disciples said to him, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. Let's hope he's dead already, right? But Jesus said to him, follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead. Whoa. Boy, if that isn't Gnostic arrogance, I don't know what is. These people are like the walking dead. You're not. You're above that as my disciple. You realize there's a higher purpose to life and a higher level of living. These people don't know that. You owe them nothing. Let them take care of it. Bury their non-living dead. In my pre-Nicene New Testament, I experiment with different possibilities, and in one version of it, I have them say, "Let the dead bury themselves." Could that be what he means? I don't know. Seems not unlikely. All right. So he's not too. This is really outrageous. This is one of those places where Jesus sounds like Diogenes the Cynic, rather than anybody in Judaism of the day, because as we've seen with Joseph of Arimathea and with the book of Tobit, which I mentioned there as an illustration of Joseph's charitable actions, burying the dead was one of the biggest mitzvot, commandments, one of the chief duties of a pious Jew, that they have to receive a burial. And if there's nobody that's gonna, because they're a despised criminal or something, or they have no more living relatives, people like Joseph of Arimathea and Tobias and so on, they would say, well, I'll bury him. They got to be buried. And it's the right thing to do. It's up to me to do it. And so that was a big thing. But here is Jesus saying, you're going to waste your time burying, let's see. Oh, man, I'm looking at the wrong one. I'm sorry, where is this? Yeah, bury my father. Your own father? Nah, forget it. That's a waste of time. Yikes. That sounds an awful lot like Diogenes, as I say. For instance, somebody saw that he was getting infirm and sick and old, and they said, I hate to bring this up, Diogenes, old boy, but you better start making some funeral plans? I mean, who's going to bury you? And he says, oh, I don't need to take care of that. When I die, the stench will be enough to get me buried. Well, I mean, what the hell? What do I care? I'll be dead meat. Who cares what they do with me? Shove me into a landfill. I don't care. And it's unlike all those ghost stories, right, where somebody dies and they're not buried, or they're somebody's violating their last will and testament to enrich themselves, whatever, and the ghost comes back to say, "Oh no, you're not getting away with this." But here, utter heedlessness about that. Okay, verse 23, when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him, and behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves. But he was asleep. And they went and woke him, saying, "Save, Lord, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you afraid, O men of little faith?" Then he rose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and hey, quiet down, for Pete's sake. Somebody's trying to sleep here. And there was a great calm, and the men marveled, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even winds and sea obey him?" There's what looks like a little detail of difference that is actually quite important here when you compare it with Mark. That's where he got the thing. The whole story is based on Jonah, of course. The prophet is asleep in a ship on the Mediterranean, and there's a terrible squall that comes, and all the sailors, who were heathen guys from various countries and religions, they're all praying to their gods. "Oh, please don't let us drown." But nothing's happening, and they say, "Well, this Jew over here hasn't prayed. Hey, buddy, we need you to pray to your God to ease up on us." And Jonah says, "Oh, no, I know why this is happening. It's because I'm here at all. I'm supposed to be going to Nineveh, but I decided I wasn't going to do it, and I'm going in the opposite direction. God is showing his displeasure. So the only thing you can do to save your own skins is to throw me overboard. I can't risk all of your lives." They try to talk him out of it, but he finally persuades them. And that's when the great sea beast swallows him and so forth, and takes him back like a aquatic taxi cab to the area, back to the Middle East, and he does go and preach, etc. Well, this is a lot like that, as Randall Helms pointed out in his book Gospel Fictions. He said Jesus is Jonah in a new version of the story. Just as the disciples wake him up because we're in danger of drowning here, and he says, "Oh no, don't worry about it. I got this all figured out." Jonah says, "You got to throw me overboard." Jesus says, "What's the matter? No faith? Okay, wind and sea, shut up." And it works. I mean, it's so similar to it. And then Matthew himself is going to return to this later with the sign of Jonah business, but we'll wait on that one. But what's the not so little detail I mentioned? Remember in Mark, the disciples say, "Lord, do you not care that we perish? We're all about to die here." And so they're indignant, understandably. "What do you mean by sleeping? Good God, we're going to drown. Bail the boat." But in Matthew, it's not, "Do you not care if we perish?" Rather, it is, "Lord, save, we are perishing." Now we've got respectful and religious language. And if there were German scholars, I forget which one, it was either Gerhard Barth or I forget the other one, but there's this great book called Tradition and Interpretation in Matthew by three scholars. And one of them has this great story, a great article about how Matthew takes raw miracle stories that are trying to get you to say, how, wow, that Jesus, he was great. He is great. I guess I'll convert to Christianity. He takes those and he's writing to Christians. So they already know Jesus is pretty great. But now they're being used as examples of prayer. It's not just, it's not Christological. Jesus is amazing. He's like a God on earth. No, we all know that. But what happens if you're in a pinch? You say, Lord, save. And so it's really a lesson in faithful prayer. It's a subtle difference, but a significant one. And he's going to do that with other ones as well. You'll see. So you got to keep your eye peeled. Disgusting as that image is, and notice little things. Okay, when he came to the 28, when he came to the other side, to the country of the Gadarenes, or some manuscripts say Gergesenes, some others say Gerasenes. I think Mark, most of his manuscripts say Gerasene, but Matthew, apparently, most of them say Gadarenes. Okay. Two demoniacs met him, coming out of the tombs, so fierce that no one could pass that way. I mean, you don't want to get mugged in any case, but by a couple of superhumanly strong, demon-possessed guys? No wonder people are steering clear there, right? So they're so fierce, right? Now, you'll notice already there's something weird here. Matthew and Luke retell this story. I'm sorry, Mark tells the story. Luke retells it from him. But when Matthew does it, he doubles the number of the demoniacs. Why am I thinking of a double mint gum commercial? Anyway, two demoniacs for the price of one. Why does he do this? I never heard a good explanation there, because he has two versions of the Bartimaeus story, the blind man whom Jesus heals, and at least one of those, there's two guys who share the role. And then when Jesus rides into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, somehow he is riding two donkeys. Richard Tierney used to picture it as, rodeo style, standing 1 foot on the back of each one. Why would he do that? Well, in that case, we'll get to that, but he's reading poetry as if it were prose. And the original prophecy supposedly being fulfilled here said, behold, daughters of Israel, your king comes to you humbly, riding on a donkey, the foal of an ass. In other words, a purebred donkey, not some kind of mule. It's half horse, half donkey, and a brand new one. So the donkey and its offspring are going in with Jesus riding, presumably the mom. So he decided to take that hyper literally. So, okay, two donkeys. What about the two Bartimaeus characters? Well, Mark said Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus. Is it possible Matthew thought that meant that there was Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, and his dad, Timaeus? That's as close as I can come to anything that makes any sense at all. Well, how about the two demoniacs? Who knows? But I have to wonder if it had something to do with Mark's demoniac being named Legion. There are many demons in the poor guy. Well, how many is Matthew going to make out of it? Maybe he figures there had to be at least two, so that's the way he's going to write it. But there's this odd doubling thing, and those might be the reasons. I can't think of anything else. Let me know if you can. Okay. 29. Behold, they cried out, what have you to do with us, O Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time? Huh? I mean, don't we have more time before we go to hell or whatever and endure terrible torment, the weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is too soon. You got to let us have our full run there. And let's see. So Jesus is sort of willing to bargain. The demons possessed him. If you cast us out, send us away into the herd of swine. And he said to them, go. So they came out and went into the swine. And behold, the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea and perished in the water. Need I say it? This is the first recorded instance of, deviled ham. The herdsmen fled, and going into the city, they told everything and what had happened to the demoniacs. And behold, all the city came out to meet Jesus. You'd think they'd give him the key to the city, right? But no. And when they saw him, they begged him to leave their neighborhood. What does this imply? Well, they're more afraid of Jesus than they were of the demoniacs. Is it because they think that Jesus is Mr. Big Demon and that these two guys are his henchmen? Well, of course, it really has to do with the death of the pigs, because that must have been a big part of the local village economy. And thanks to Jesus' little bargain with the demons, the pigs and the whole herd is dead. Yeah, thanks a lot. Of course, Jesus probably doesn't think it's much of a loss, since these guys were not Jews and they're eating non-kosher food, but which he wouldn't touch with a 10-foot fork. So again, Matthew, and you notice here, Matthew has actually condensed the story. Matthew's gospel is substantially longer than Mark's, but in fact, the individual stories are more condensed and abridged. And St. Augustine said Mark appears to be an abridged version of Matthew, but no, it's shorter, but its stories are longer. And Matthew had to compress them because he had a bunch more he wanted to add. And they had to work within the parameters of the standard lengths of scrolls in those days. And there were two major types at the stationery store. One is shorter, and that's what Mark was written on. He was confined by the amount of space he had. Matthew had a lot more, but he also had a lot more space, but he also had a lot more stuff to add. And so he figured, well, I'd better cut some stuff from Mark in my version. And of course, that means that Mark is earlier, not later than Matthew. St. Augustine had the relationship wrong. Okay, excuse me. Maybe you get rid of demons when you blow your nose. I don't know. Okay, who've we got asking some good questions here? Let's see. Oh, yeah, okay, that's not it. Bucky asks, does the Bible Geek of Matthew compare, does, okay, I guess you mean does Matthew's Koine Greek, how does it compare to the Koine or official Greek of the 5th or 6th century Eastern Empire? Well, all I know is that I don't think it's nearly as ornate and elaborate. You have something that's not even all that, well, let's say 2 Peter. Those who know this better than I say that 2 Peter has a Baroque, almost Byzantine type of Greek, more so than 1 Peter, which is, of course, later than Matthew, although not by much, I would guess. whereas Revelation has an almost crude, sort of sometimes ungrammatical Greek. And I don't know how much those differences have to do with the time in which it was written, or the place, or just the level of education of the writer. But I don't think Matthew's Greek has anywhere near the complexity of the Greek of the Eastern Empire. Just a few centuries later. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure. I just don't know it in all kinds of detail. Let's see, Peter Rabbit, can you speak on the various occasions where Jesus gets annoyed? Doesn't he get frustrated with the leper in one manuscript? I'm not sure where it occurs, but I think you're speaking of one where the guy asks Jesus for healing, and then Jesus groans in anger, and people have always wondered, well, what is he upset about? And I think some manuscripts have some other reading I've forgotten, and so people say, well, perhaps he's angry at the condition of humanity with all of this suffering, and he's angry. But I don't know. It doesn't. That's a little bit far fetched, but you're right. Otherwise, if he's angry, what's he angry at? I don't think there's any irreverence or any deception attributed to the person seeking the healing, and he does go ahead and heal him. That is pretty strange. He gets mad at religious stuffed shirts that oppose him for healing people on the Sabbath. Come on. What the Sabbath is for? It's for the rest of, it's for a day of rest for people. Wouldn't that include healing their sicknesses? I mean, that gives them relief. What are you bothering me for? And it does say he looked around at the people and was angry at their hardness of heart, but angry at the person he's going to heal. I don't think I've seen that. There's a couple of things you might want to take that way, like in John, I think it's chapter 5, where they're at the healing pool, and whenever it starts to bubble up, the popular belief is an angel is disturbing the water, and that's your signal to get your butt over there. First one in gets healed. And this guy who's been there for years and is still not healed, Jesus is told about him, and he goes over to the guy and said, "What, do you even want to be healed? Why do you come here all the time for years and not be healed?" And the guy has a pretty good reply. He says, "Look, I'm lame. I can't get up and walk to the thing. I'd need somebody to carry me." Even then, I probably couldn't beat these other guys who are sick with other things. So I'm always getting beat out. Well, you still have to ask, well, then why are you bother coming? Was the guy begging? That occurs to me. That might be why he was there. "Take pity and alms for next leper." But I'm not sure. That's a good question. I have a hunch there's been some copying error or something. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Let's see. Notan Emil Prague. He says, Dr. Price, the names I'm looking for is Heinz Joachim Held, Gunther Bornkamm, and Gerhard Barth. Yeah, it was Held that I couldn't remember. I sort of think he's the one that wrote this essay, but I'd have to check. It wasn't Bornkamm. It might have been Barth. Thank you. I sure appreciate it. There is a literate man. Maybe he ought to be the Bible geek. And I've always felt that several people that send in questions here could host the show themselves. Maybe they'll get the chance. Okay. Let's see this. I think. Come on now. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Daniel Hopkins answers, great, okay. See what I mean? He says, Bucky, the New Testament Greek koine term for bad, kakos, is to be etymologized from Sanskrit / Pahlavi gogos, or cow killer, used around the time of the so-called Persian impostor Gamota, for cow sacrifice. Yeah, interesting. So there is this etymological link, but I'm not sure that. I was thinking this would address the issue of how does the Greek compare, and I guess he's giving us a particular instance of it. Yeah, let's see. One from Kirk. Boy, I tell you, these glasses, I can't get used to them. Kirk Robb. I could listen to Dr. Price all day, and I'm very glad he's been delivered from the evil spirit of Bultmann. I'm afraid, hallelujah, that's not true, because he came back, found the place clean and swept, and brought back with him Born Calm, Konzelman, Kaiserman, Robinson, and various of his 7 of his students with him. So, I'm sorry that exorcism didn't last all that long. Sad to say. Z Stallone says, how much does Matthew differ from the Q source? And when would the Q source likely have been written? Who knows? I have this crazy theory that it might be later than 4th Ezra, which seems to be post fall of Jerusalem, and though not immediately after, because there are passages in the so-called in the first couple of chapters of 4th Ezra, aka 2nd Esdras, that sound an awful lot like certain things in Matthew, like the Gentiles coming from east and west and so on, and other things too that strike me as unlikely to be borrowings from Matthew. And since they're in both Matthew and Luke, I would say he must have had a copy of Q, and that maybe Matthew got it from him. I know that's a kind of crazy sounding thing. It's generally thought that Luke stays closer to Q than Matthew does. Matthew tends to poeticize things. Like if you compare Luke's version of the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father, it's more prosy. Luke's is, Father, thy kingdom come. Well, in Matthew, it's Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, and so forth. So I don't know how you would determine this, though. You could say, well, Luke must be closer to Q, and Matthew seems to have embellished it. But on the other hand, you can read Luke as breaking up some of the poetic couplets of Matthew, and just for, I don't know why, but to make them more prosaic. So I don't really know, but usually, at least for what it's worth, most scholars think Luke was closer to Q, and often it does kind of seem that way, because where Matthew differs with him in this treatment of a particular saying, it seems to bear the typical marks of Matthean redaction and expansion. Like Matthean favorite phrases will suddenly be part of the saying, whereas they weren't there in Luke. So I guess I would agree Luke is probably closer to the original Q. So that's about what I know. So, Notan again. Let's see what he has said. By the way, okay. Notan says tradition and interpretation in Matthew, as well as tons of other books related to this topic, they're freely available to read on archive. You just need an account to borrow it. This is, I of course am a relic from the Dark Ages, so I still am dependent on actual books, but this is, oh yeah, that he says that's Internet Archive. Of course, I'm glad that all these great helps exist, and that really is terrific. Gnostic Quran, I have a quick question. Are there intentional lies in the Gospels? And if so, what would be an example? Well, one that comes to mind is in the Gospel of John, right where Jesus' brothers are packing up to go to a feast in Jerusalem, and they say, "Hey, come on, aren't you going to the feast?" And they're very cynical about Jesus. I mean, you want to build your brand, don't you? Your reputation. Surely you got to address your fans there. And Jesus says, "Nah, I'm sitting this one out. You go ahead, have a good time." And then about 10 minutes after they leave, Jesus pulls his suitcase out of concealment and heads for Jerusalem. Why was he lying to them? Because it sure seems that he was. I mean, they're going to know he's there, right? He is a public speaker, and he's going to do that again once they get there. What are his brothers supposed to think when they see him? Hey, what? I thought he wasn't going. That lying bastard. I don't know what the idea there is. I mean, you could say don't cast your pearls before swine, but that really doesn't involve lying. It's just withholding information. But he's not going to be able to maintain this falsehood. So that would be one. Let's see who else is. If anybody else is lying in the Gospels. Jesus gives equivocal replies to Caiaphas and Pilate. Are you the Messiah, the King of Israel? Well, if you say so. Well, wait a minute, give me a straight answer, and he won't. But that's not a lie. That's the only one I can think of. If anybody else can, please chime in. So, yeah, interesting question. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Okay. I believe that's it for the show. It is about an hour. What I would like to do is just take the last few minutes to read you this chapter out of my book, just to tantalize you, perhaps. My book I'm still working on called The Heresy of Paraphrase. Let me just get that up here to. Oh boy, that's not it. Oh no, that's not it either. Sorry about this. Maybe I'll have better luck here. Yes, okay. Yeah, all righty. Chapter 8. just to give you an idea of what I'm doing to the Gospel of Matthew. Let's go scrolling down. Okay, Sermon on the Mount. But this is kind of funny, I think. Okay, when he descended the mountain, huge crowds continued to follow him, eager to hear what he might say or do next. A leper found it easy to approach him, since as soon as the crowd saw him coming, they hastened to get out of his way, lest they become contaminated. The outcast kneeled in front of Jesus, saying, "My Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." And without hesitation, Jesus extended his hand and touched him, saying, "Why not? Be clean." At once his skin rash vanished. Jesus whispered in his ear, "When you return home, don't tell anyone how this happened, all right? Just show yourself to your local priest for examination. Once you offer the requisite sacrifice of gratitude, you ought to be able to circulate openly again." Upon his return to Capernaum, Jesus was accosted by a Roman centurion saying, "Sir, my servant is lying paralyzed at home in bed and he's in terrible pain." Jesus replied, "Then let's go. No use in delaying. He's suffered enough." The centurion sounded alarm and replied, "Oh, no, that's not necessary. I'm not worthy to have someone like you visit my poor home. I just need you to say the word and I know the lad will be healed. You see, I know how it works. There's a chain of command we follow. I give orders and expect my men to carry them out. I have to obey my superiors in turn. I give orders to my servant, rub down the horse Gaius, and he does it. Well, it seems to me you're in command here, so just give the order to the boy's demon, and I know it'll go." This stopped Jesus in his tracks. He said to the listening crowd, "Well, look at this. I only wish anyone in Israel could match this Gentile's faith. Mark my words, one day people will journey from nations far and wide to take their seats at table alongside Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in paradise. Meanwhile, the rightful heirs to the kingdom will writhe in anguish that they were not invited after all. Instead, they will be consigned to the eternal night." Then he turned back to the centurion and assured him, "Go now, let it be done as you requested." And sure enough, the servant was found to have recovered at that exact moment. Peter invited Jesus to his home. As he entered, he saw his host's mother-in-law lying ill in her bed, burning with a fever. As soon as he took her hand, the fever disappeared. She arose quickly, full of new vigor, and made them lunch. They relaxed until the workday was over, and the crowd formed again right outside the front door. Everyone had brought their relatives who were demon-possessed. He got busy expelling the demons with only a word, and he cured all the sick with non-supernatural ailments as well. Little did these folks suspect they were acting the roles prescribed by the ancient prophet Isaiah. He took our sicknesses onto himself and disposed of our maladies. On another occasion, when Jesus saw a crowd rapidly forming around him, he directed his men to prepare the boat and cross over to the opposite side of the lake. Seeing that he was about to depart, a scribe came up and told him, "Teacher, I will follow you to the very ends of the earth if you'll have me." Jesus replied, "Are you sure? The foxes have dens and the birds can return to their nests, but a man like me has no guaranteed place to sleep for the night." Another would-be disciple stepped forth to say, "Master, just wait for me to go see to my father's funeral." Jesus shook his head and said, "Follow me and to hell with the dead. You're not one of them yet, so make good use of the time you have left." Then he stepped into the boat, his disciples behind him like ducklings following their mother. And look, a terrible storm whipped up on the lake, and the boat was quickly getting swamped. All the while, an exhausted Jesus was peacefully asnooze. His fellow passengers shook him awake, pleading, Lord, save, we're about to die. He seemed puzzled and said to them, What are you afraid of? Don't you have a Father who watches over you? He got up and stood in the hold, heedless of the lashing wind and rain, and shouted into the storm. At once the lake settled back into a calm. The disciples were speechless for a few moments, then amazed and said, This is no mere man. Like Poseidon, he commands even the waves of the sea. And they feared him. When the boat finally docked at the country of the Gadarenes, a pair of raging demoniacs emerged from the nearby cemetery to challenge him. The two of them were so fearsome that none of the Gadarenes dared to pass that way, gladly taking a longer, circuitous route. One of them screamed in Jesus' face, What do you think you're doing here, Son of God? His companion shouted, You can't touch us yet. We've still got plenty of time. It's not fair. The first replied, He's a god. He can do what he wants. So it happened that a large herd of pigs were peacefully grazing some distance away. Noticing them, the demons infesting the men pleaded with Jesus, saying, Look, if you're dead set on evicting us, why not transfer us into those hogs over there? Jesus turned to glance at the pigs, then said, All right, now get the hell out of here. The two men collapsed like empty suits, which is essentially what they were. In the next moment, the pigs went wild, as if a bomb had exploded in their midst. In another instant, the poor shoats plunged over the nearby precipice to their deaths. The swineherds watched all this in slack-jawed horror. Full of desperate panic, they bolted as the pigs had done, only in the opposite direction, back to their village. Pale and breathless, they recounted what they had seen. Their curiosity aroused, all the Gadarenes dropped what they were doing and marched out to see the mystery man who had such power over both spirits and swine. When they got a look at Jesus, flanked by two taller figures who were disheveled but no longer naked, clad in borrowed shrouds, they feared Jesus was a sorcerer who commanded the two as his henchmen. Haven't you tormented our village long enough? Why don't you go and leave us in peace? Without a word, Jesus rose and walked back toward the boat, followed by his disciples, who were glad to exit a charged situation. As for the two recovered demoniacs, there was no room for them in the boat, and they knew they should receive no welcome in the village. So after discussing it, they decided to stay living in the empty mausoleums. And with some spring cleaning, they weren't really all that bad. Okay, so that's the heretical Price version of the chapter, the 8th chapter of Matthew. So it gives you a feel for the way I'm tormenting it. Let's see. Well, I guess that is it for the Gospel of Matthew today. And with that, I will bid you adieu. And I'll be seeing you on the Bible Geek. So thanks for being with me. And please do on, why can I never think of the name of it, YouTube, go over there and subscribe to our channel. Sure would appreciate that. Thank you.